Yo.
Hey,
Hello.
welcome to the new meta, episode 33.
Yeah.
We got Lord Fluffy, myself, ThaPChild, and a special guest, the man sitting between us,
The Godfather.
the godfather of my streaming career, David Brevik,
Yeah.
is in the house. David,
Hello.
thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I can't believe you agreed to this. It blew my mind. So thank you so much.
Yeah, for anyone in stream that doesn't know who David Brevik is, obviously one of the creators of Diablo itself. Also, kind of the mastermind behind Hellgate London, which he might not take credit for, but it kind of spawned like all the PvE FPS that we kind of see today that are really, really popular, which is really cool. And of course, Marvel Heroes, which is a big one. But yeah, long time Diablo guy.
Even a little work on Path of Exiles.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah,
It's true.
very cool.
Very cool. Man, let's just get rolling. So we had a poll last week, and you want to do this first?
We can wait next week on the poll.
Save the poll for next week.
Yeah.
But
yeah, let's just go. You want to go ahead?
Let's just go straight to the questions because I don't know how much time we're going to have.
Sure.
Fluff and I did a lot of research, and we wanted to not ask the same questions that you've been asked in every single interview you've ever done, because people can go out and find those and watch those.
All right, I'm ready.
So you mentioned Apple style releases in the past and how Blizzard should handle titles, and could you like shed some light on why you think it's the right model for Blizzard and companies?
Well, traditionally, a long time ago, it would be we'd have to generate a lot of buzz to garner an audience when you're releasing a title, whatever it was. Communication was kind of poor. It was all about magazines and getting on the cover of a magazine so that you could get into a bookstore or somebody could see it on a shelf at wherever you're buying magazines, the grocery store or whatever. And so it was really important to get all that presence out there, and it took a long time to kind of build that up, right? It was getting that word out there took a year to really kind of be able to make it work. Since then, times have changed quite a bit, and so, but I still feel like in a lot of ways, video game companies are doing the marketing the same way that they used to, and I don't really know how good that is. I'm not really convinced that it's a good thing at all. I mean, everybody can guess. We don't know for a fact, but everybody's pretty sure that they're making a Diablo 4. Diablo 3 made a lot of money. Why wouldn't they make a Diablo 4? Right. It seems like that would. So everybody's knows that this title kind of exists or is going to exist someday. And everybody's excited for it to be announced, but there is no advantage to them announcing it, in my opinion, unless it's like 2 months or 3 months from release. And the reason is because as soon as you announce it, the hype goes through the roof.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, you want to capture that hype, right? You want to, you get one stab when there are now, let's say, on Steam, 40 games a day, and there are all of these products kind of every day. There are hundreds of iPhone games. There are just like so many games. There's so much content out there that to really make any kind of buzz or any kind of excitement, you gotta kind of hit it hard. You got to make it like really sticky, and that's one of the things they do at Apple. It's like, we've announced the new iPhone. Everybody knows that there's going to be a new iPhone.
Yeah.
And then they announce it and people are hyped. And then in 6 weeks, they have it in their hands kind of thing, or even shorter, 3 weeks or something like that. Right. So it's this kind of like build the hype up, announce it, and then they get the product right away, I think is really the way to kind of go about marketing these days, much more than, because if you start to make noise and it takes a year or 2 years, then you get nothing but disgruntled gamers.
Sure.
Right. Because they have to they have to piece out their information over a period of a year or 2 years or whatever. And they got to, oh, we're going to make this little piece of content or about this little minor aspect of the game. And hopefully we'll get a little press about it here and then a little bit here. And you get like kind of this drawn out buzz. And then people start going, well, what's wrong? What's, you know, why is it taking so long? And then they start debating some of the decisions that they're making and tell us more about these things. And anyway, in a lot of ways, it just creates a giant headache for the company. And it just makes much more sense to hit it hard, right? Oh, here's the announcement. You can play in 6 weeks. And everybody's just super excited about that. That's a win for everybody. There isn't a bunch of time for a bunch of people to like overhype themselves. And then they can play very quickly. So in my opinion, I think that if I were Blizzard, I wouldn't announce the product or Diablo 4. If there is a Diablo 4, I don't have any inside information, but if there was a Diablo 4, which we can all imagine, I wouldn't announce it until like it's almost ready.
Do you think?
So what if?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the follow up that I had is that just kind of totally makes me go back to the Diablo Immortal announcement, and my thought process was if it would have been received so much better had they given us a D4 symbol or anything like, hey, we're working on Diablo 4. While we do this, here's Diablo Immortal to hold you over. And that was kind of my mentality when I saw that, like, man, if they would have fed us anything else, I think we would have received that product a lot better. So but I understand what you're saying about the Apple style releases and it makes sense. So how do you feel about doing something like that? Still a bad idea?
Well, the Diablo Immortal announcement is its own kind of ball of wax, but I think that part of the problem, I think that they did a couple things poorly in that they built up the hype for an announcement, for a Diablo announcement. And then the Diablo people are really excited because they're hardcore Diablo people and they're spending all sorts of money and they're flying out all over the country to go get this Diablo announcement. Oh, here comes Diablo 4. Everybody's real excited about it. Bam, this is going to be awesome. And then they get there and it's like, wait, what?
Right, yeah.
This wasn't what we were expecting. This isn't what kind of we were quote unquote promised, but not really promised. They didn't promise anything, but it was like everybody expected one thing. And so Blizzard did a really bad job with managing people's expectations. They did a bad job of like announcing something to a hardcore PC crowd, what wasn't what they were expecting. They didn't really, if they had announced Diablo Immortal the way that they announced Diablo Switch with some cute little thing and a couple pictures on the internet, nobody would have cared. Like it was like, oh, okay, Diablo Immortal, all right, whatever. We'll wait and see a little bit more. But because everybody's expectations were one way and they got something different, it just, it was a kind of a disaster. Yeah. So I think that, it goes in the, that their PR, I think is in their messaging. We don't know anything about Diablo Immortal. Diablo Immortal could end up being the greatest phone game of all time. And then everybody will look really, kind of angry. Like, wow, this is the greatest game of all time. I didn't know that this was going to be like this. We just don't know any information. We don't know anything about the business model. We don't know anything about the content. We don't know anything. And so I'm waiting to reserve judgment on the game before I say it's, crap or, Blizzard did something that we didn't expect. I mean, Blizzard has a history and a policy in general of being generous gamers, right? Generous. And so I can't imagine they're making a Diablo Immortal, cash grab. That doesn't mean it flies in the face of their entire history. So I kind of reject that notion in general. But again, the announcement was bad. Will the product be good? Who knows? Let's wait. And then, but I think that if they had announced it in a different way under different circumstances and also were allowed to play it, then that'd be great. One of the announcements that was really great a few years ago was that Bethesda announced where they're like, oh, we're going to make this little mobile thing. Yeah. And you can play it right after this. Like it's in the store, that was awesome. And that got a lot of buzz and a lot of downloads because people were just like, oh, okay, well, this will tide me over for a little while. And that's kind of fun. If they would have done that way, I think it would have been more accepted. Sure. So, I think that there are a bunch of mistakes, but, we all make mistakes and hindsight's always 20/20. It's easy to second guess.
So going back to that kind of Apple paradigm, do you think that same paradigm works in? So let's just take the Apple paradigm. So that iPhone 9 comes out, right? And a year down the road, there's been no patch for the iPhone 9. Like there's critical bugs with the iPhone 9. They're not saying that they're working on the iPhone 10 at all. Do you think that like that still holds up because you're kind of just leaving everyone in the total darkness? Like you just it's
the thing is that Diablo in general, it's going to sell great when it comes out, right? They don't need to build more hype for it. They need to, again, what is the advantage to them to talking to the community?
I would.
Is there a business advantage?
No business.
I claim no, that everybody will buy Diablo 4, regardless of how much time and effort they put into the community, in between.
Okay.
And so, then they just get themselves in trouble and they're, quote unquote, waste time with the community. They could be doing development stuff instead of, managing the community's expectations 24/7. And, managing the community's expectations, well, they've already kind of proven that they did kind of a bad job of that. So they, I think that, I don't think it behooves them to talk about it at all. Right. And yes, it keeps everybody in the dark, but it's not like the gamers have a right to know or anything like that. They don't have. They're going to announce it when they announce it, and we'll be excited when it happens.
Do you like the model where some games will come out and be like, okay, hey, we're developing this, and then a year down the road they either just run out of money or it just doesn't look good, people don't like it, and then it fails, and the community ultimately knows that it fails. Is there really anything wrong with that, or do you think that?
You mean early access kind of stuff?
Kind of, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally doing early access for my game right now, and I've really enjoyed the process. Now, I've been part of early access things that have gone south, and I've been part of early access things that have worked well, and so it's just hit or miss. Like, there's not much you can do. You just have to trust or believe in the developer, and if the developer has a history of doing some decent things, like the idea of, hey, we've got a sketch and a 1,000-word document, we're going to make this game, that that's a much more dangerous prospect than somebody that you can play the game and prove that I can try it out and et cetera, I know kind of where this is going. It's much different. And then you kind of look at the history of how often they're updating it and how open they are about the product. I think that in general, for me, it's been a great process, but it isn't for everybody. Part of the problem is, like in a big company like Blizzard, if they were going to do a early access for Diablo 4, I think that might be a problem. I mean, it could be great, it could be a problem. It's just hard to know. But they can run their own little private closed beta and get good feedback from a couple hundred people and not have it for sale where they got millions of people and are really supporting a live game without it being finished.
Right on. Yeah, I get that. Go ahead.
That's right.
Moving on, what were some of your inspirations, I guess, growing up that may have led you to Diablo?
Well, a lot of games. Let's see. The first, I'd say like Wizardry and Ultima were the first games that really kind of captured, I guess maybe Adventure on the 2600 was probably one of the very first games that really captured my spirit. Very first video game I ever played was Pong. I had a Pong machine in 1974 or something like that, and that was the very first video game I ever played. And then slightly after that was Space Invaders, and there was a sandwich shop near us that got a machine, and I fell in love with video games from that point on. And then we had Atari 2600 and all this. And then I got an Apple II Plus and learned to program and et cetera. So there was a lot of influence during that early time with different games and stuff. But then as I got older, I always wanted to make role-playing games. Have always been my favorite. I was a big D&D fan. I still do a lot of pencil and paper gaming as well as board gaming. And in fact, last night for New Year's Eve, we played board games all night. So awesome. You know, so I've always really been into role-playing games. And as I played more and more all through the 80s, as you know, for everything from Might and Magic, Bard's Tale, like all of these great games, I kind of decided that this is really what I want to do with my life. And it was an article that was in, believe it or not, the National Enquirer of all things, where Richard Garriott said that he made like $100,000 off of Ultima 1, making Ultima 1. I was like, oh my God, which was like a lot of money,
right?
Whatever, 1992 or whatever it was, right? You know, and I'm reading this and I'm realizing, oh my God, I could do this for a living. And so that was a big influence on me, was hey, someday I could actually make money, you know, making video games. It never really even dawned on me before that it was a business. Sure. And so that was a big influence. And then when I was in college, I started playing a lot of MUDs and as well as roguelike games. I mean, I was actually playing Rogue, where the term roguelike comes from. Right. So a lot of, you know, games that are on the Unix machines that have, you know, you were like the letter A and you're attacking, you know, the letter K kind of thing. But it was like randomly generated dungeons and random items and all that stuff, which is a big influence on Diablo.
Sure.
So those titles were like Angband, Moria, Rogue, NetHack. Those things were a huge influence on Diablo.
So you mentioned that dynamic map generation. How do you feel about Diablo Immortal? Pretty much confirmed not to have that at all.
Yeah, I don't know. It's again, we'll wait and see. But I think that it might be just different with a phone game. Sure. You know, I don't know how. You know, it depends on the structure, right? Because there are phone games, like I play a lot of phone games, and there are phone games where you just can repeat the same level over and over again for energy, basically. And so you don't want to play it over and over randomly. You want it to like simulate over and over randomly, right? Because it's like this grindy kind of game. So it depends on the structure. If it's something like that where it's kind of grindy, and then it's like, well, I just want to simulate. I don't want to. It doesn't matter to me that it's not random. But if I'm playing the game all the time and I'm running around maps and the map's the same over and over again, I'd find that pretty repetitive.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
You talked a little bit about your college and inspirations and stuff. When you were decided to make this a career, did you get flack from your parents or peers or friends? Because that's something that I personally get still to this day, and it's interesting that it's so negatively looked upon, I think, at least in my experience.
Yeah, well, I think that part of the problem is that I got recruited by Intel, and my dad's like, you gotta go take that job. No, Dad, I'm gonna go make video games. He's like, you got your degree in computer science. What the hell are you doing? And you know, you got to be a responsible adult at this point. And but you know, I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and it was like, hey, this is an opportunity. If it goes south and it doesn't work out, you know, maybe I've spent a couple years tiddling around with something that didn't work out, but you know, I want to give it a shot. And if there's any time in my life to do it, it's now, when I don't have the responsibilities of a family or anything like that right now. And so that was, they agreed that, you know, obviously they wanted me to be happy, but there was a lot of resistance, let's say, like that. I had a really great career job lined up for me, and I said no to. And then I went to work for this little company that called FM Waves, where I was making a game on the Atari Lynx, and that was there like, I don't know, maybe 3 months. My paycheck started bouncing.
Oh boy!
Like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? My dad was right.
You had to tell him, Dad, my paycheck bounced. You know, I don't know.
Anyway, so in the end, though, you know, obviously it's worked out just fine. But it was a little bit sketchy at the beginning.
Right.
That's awesome.
So just randomly in another interview, you kind of mentioned, you know, I put in quotes, I like skill trees.
Yeah.
When do you think, like, I feel like there's a balance, right? So Diablo, you can change runes, you just go back to town and bing, bang, boom, change your build, no big deal. Even allows you to like save your builds now using the armory. And then you have builds like PoE, where it has like this, blah, you know, of skills. They're just like, but you know, choices become less meaningful, like 1% block chance and stuff like that. So, I mean, can you elaborate more on, you know, why you like skill trees and what do you think that balance is?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough. I like skill trees in general, just because I like people to make decisions. I like people, you know, the ability for them to make choices and customize their characters. That's always been something that's been important to me in making any kind of role-playing game. Decisions on builds and things like that are you know, what makes the game intriguing to me. So skill trees was really the invention of we had originally in Diablo 1 we had it that, you know, anybody could learn any skill, and that was one of our shticks. That was one of the things that we wanted as a concept, but we found that people could make some really bad characters this way and like use skills that they weren't supposed to be using necessarily. I mean, they could use them, but it wasn't really like wise to use those skills, these different classes and stuff. So we wanted to kind of change it for Diablo 2. And when we, it was the skill trees was, I've been playing a lot of Master of Orion, and that was a big influence on me and coming up with the idea for the skill trees. It was one of my shower ideas. I would always come in and say, I was thinking about this in the shower this morning, and inevitably met somebody had like 2 weeks worth of work or something like that. So it was like, no, God, Dave, don't talk about your shower ideas. Yeah, that's just more work for me.
Sure.
So anyway, so I like the idea of this. You get to make choices on how you build your character. That was kind of it was like a tech tree, basically, from you know, any kind of these kind of strategy games. And so we kind of worked on it and iterated on it quite a bit. And I like where it ended up. And I like the balance between complexity and choice. So I don't really like the idea of you get to choose and switch your build around willy-nilly without any kind of ramifications. I'm not really into skill point resets and things like that. I like that making choices has meaning. And I also like that you can't get everything. I like both of those kind of aspects. It's so you have to make choices and the choices have meaning. Now, when the choices don't have meaning or there are too many choices, then I feel like it's just overwhelming. Now, that's Path of Exiles. That's what makes them different from everybody else. It's like, that's one of our core features is look at how crazy this skill tree is. And so that, you know, that's kind of what their little thing that sticks out for them. So, you know, I think that it depends on your own design philosophies. Mine has always been lots of complexity, but not through lots of choices. Instead, make choices limited and complexity deep in that choice.
How do you feel about like the difficulty of maybe being able to respec? And I know that's, you know, something Diablo 2, you kind of started over, and PoE is kind of the same way. You can spend a lot of currency and kind of revamp, but
yeah, in general, I don't like resets at all.
Okay.
You know, I think that I mean, it's okay if it's difficult, I would guess, but if it's something where I can just do it anytime, it takes away any kind of meaning to your choice.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Yep. That too.
Yeah. So moving on, in Hellfire, before Hellfire, I know Hellfire, you know, wasn't like the greatest thing in your eyes. But you said that in another interview, you wanted to kind of move on to Diablo 2 because Diablo 1 had become kind of this rampant cheat fest. But, you know, looking back now, you know, Diablo 2 had a lot of that as well. did you foresee any of that happening while you guys were developing Diablo 2?
Well, we knew that certain things were possible, but largely a lot of the cheating that was so rampant in Diablo 1 wasn't possible in Diablo 2.
Right.
And so that helped a lot. Now they got away around things, and they found ways to like to make cheats, if you want to call them cheats or whatever. I mean, questionable whether or not a bot is a cheater or not. I mean, I guess it is a cheat if it's competitive, but it's if it's not competitive, I don't really know how much of a cheat it is. But so I think that you know, cheating, what people consider cheating and not cheating is kind of changed. There were ways to like dupe items and stuff like that, and those were all just bugs in the code. And the way that we kind of created the code, and we found there were loopholes of the way that we did things. A lot of times, like, this was because this is our first time that we ever did client server. We didn't understand some of the things, like destroying items and creating new ones and stuff like that is always super risky. It's much better to keep items around and be able to trace them and have like all of these kind of like unique identifiers and stuff like that. Stuff that we learned through the process of making the game. But now, you know, that we have that knowledge, it's a lot easier to prevent those things. So it was kind of on the edge, the forefront of client server stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that was, you know, there were a lot of hard lessons at the beginning, but in general, you couldn't do the kind of cheating where you could just level up automatically and give yourself the best items and all the kind of things that were possible in Diablo 1. You couldn't do with Diablo 2, at least online. Right. And so it solved a lot of the problems, even though it did have cheating.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the rampant botting within Diablo 3's community? Like,
yeah, I think it's a big problem, but I think that it's an impossible thing to solve. Largely, it is super difficult to kind of keep up with the. Anytime you can think of a rule for, you know, is this a bot or not a bot? They can break the rule. So you're just like, it's this constant fight about, you know, oh, we believe that they're botting, but we can't prove they're botting. Could it be a person there? If a person's there and they're botting, but they press spacebar every now and then, and they're just like watching the screen, is that really cheating? I don't, you know. So, yeah. You know, and if it's a team of people, you know, it's tough to say, tough to come up with rules, right? And you can't make it so restrictive that people can't play the game. And then as you ease those restrictions, they can just fit any kind of bot inside there. So that it's an impossible thing to solve, and you can just try your best at coming up with some clever ways to catch them. But largely, they're going to get around those things pretty quickly. And so it's, I think, an impossible thing to solve.
So you think it's just a losing battle with online games in general? Yeah.
Yep.
That's so it's disheartening to hear, but yes, probably true.
It's just like any kind of like virus, like doing an antivirus software.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's a losing battle. People can just come up with new ideas and new viruses and new ways. And since software is constantly changing, there's constantly new loopholes and things like that. So it's very difficult. It's just almost an impossible fight to have.
Yeah.
And so it kind of leads into the next question, where so you can bot in obviously Diablo 3, and it doesn't really affect like the economy and how most players play the game, but it affects everyone's ability to like kind of push the leaderboard. So it affects the competitive aspect of the game. Whereas in PoE, you know, people bot and they can sell currency, and then, you know, pretty much every item is purchasable in Path of Exile. So, and you mentioned in another interview, there's a fine line between what's called an auction house game and, you know, something like Diablo where it's all smart loot. Where do you think, where would you like to be in that realm between, you know, 100% time on the auction house? Do you think it should be like time, like a percentage of your time, or do you think stuff should be soul bound? Like, what are your thoughts on?
My general philosophy is the easier it is to trade items, the more you need soul bound stuff, and or things that you just can't trade or sell in some way. So there are a million ways to solve soul binding, and you can do, you know, you can soul bind it 3 times or something like that. You know, there's like lots of variations and ways that you can wiggle around that. But you have to take items out of the economy. And if there is no way to take items out of the economy, then everybody's going to have the best stuff, right? And that's the problem with the auction house, is that then you're just surfing the auction house for the best gear rather than playing the game. And what's the point of the game, right? So if you can buy everything, then you're in trouble. So you have to reserve some of the equipment to be earnable in the game. It's okay to have some stuff that you can sell and trade and whatever, and that it's a vibrant community. But again, the easier it is to trade something, the more and more you need that. If it's kind of a pain in the butt, like it is in Diablo 2, it was kind of a pain to actually, like, I'm going to spam in the chat here to all 20 people or whatever in this chat room that I've got this weirdo object for sale or whatever, and hopefully somebody stops by that likes it, and then we have to get in a game together, and who knows who's scamming who, and everybody's nervous, and and that's like it was a real kind of, it was a difficult way to. So it didn't really matter that much, because the way that you were communicating and transferring items was very difficult and questionable. And so when you do something like nothing is soulbound and everybody can sell everything and everybody can just go to a window instantly and look at everything in the game, then you've ruined your game, right? It's because if the point of the game is finding loot and progressing and you can just purchase that, then what's the whole point of the game? So that's that doesn't, that I think that Path of Exile has kind of reached this point where they put in all these kind of like little features, and it's become easier and easier to kind of trade stuff and find stuff. And now they're at a point where it's pretty much everywhere. And in a lot of ways, it almost doesn't make sense that it isn't just straight in the game, because they just have like an auction house where you go to. So my idea has been always that our action RPGs should have the same kind of auction house that they do in World of Warcraft.
Yes.
Where you can go to the World of Warcraft auction house, and there are a couple cool items that you can buy that are upgrades on the from the latest coolest content or whatever. And you can get a couple of things, but really to get most of it, you have to go to this new content area and get some of the equipment, do the fights and that kind of stuff. But you can get a good jump start on your character by other things, So I think that if they had a similar kind of system in Diablo or whatever, but again, it comes down to World of Warcraft has soulbound items. And then the reason that it works is because some of the stuff is for sale, but not everything, and other things you have to actually be able to find and pick up and put on yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
That leads me into a little bit of Diablo 3 discussion, but I have a question. How do you feel about Diablo 3 in general? Like, I don't know how to phrase it right, but what's your thoughts on Diablo 3?
Well, I mean, Diablo 3, I think Diablo 3 turned into a really good game that that a lot of people enjoy a lot. And so I think, it's done the Diablo name proud after kind of a bunch of work. When it first came out, it was not super well received. They made some pretty bad decisions from the design standpoints. The real money auction house and some stuff like that were, not received well. And so after the expansion and things like that, and after tinkering with it and adding some of the features that they added to the game, it became a much deeper game and much more meaningful. The choices were more meaningful, not completely, but then it kind of worked out a little bit of the kinks with the item game and stuff like that. And it became a much more interesting game later on. So it took them a few years to get there, but I think that in the end they made something that does the Diablo name proud.
Do you have any thoughts on what it would take to reinvigorate Diablo to make it shine again? Do you think it can, or do you think it's past its window?
Do you mean Diablo 3 or do you mean Diablo in general?
3 specifically, but I could go in general if you want.
Do general too.
We could do general.
Diablo, I think that Diablo 3, I don't think there's much. I mean, I don't know what gamers really expect. There's plenty of content and plenty of things to do, and they have the new ladders and things like that, new seasons. So that's I think that's all that really can be expected from a game that's as old as it is now, and has been popular for such a long time. And really, they should be focused on doing the next thing, which is what I would guess that they are doing. There is no real way to revitalize unless they came out with an expansion or something like that. But again, why would they do that? The problem is, from a business standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to spend their time and effort on another expansion. Even if the expansion sold well, it's not going to sell as well as the Diablo 4.
Sure.
And so, you know, expansions tend to sell less and less with each next expansion. So like the main game sells the most, then the first expansion sells the next most, the second expansion sells the next most, and it keeps going down. And not only that, but they just can't even make it. They don't sell expansions as much as they sell box products. So in a lot of ways, if they're going to go to a lot of effort, they should be focused on something new, and go from there. As for Diablo in general, what is it to take to revitalize it? I think that Diablo, you know, the new Diablo is going to have some kind of differences in gameplay, you know, and I'm a big believer in the direction I was trying to take action RPGs, and I still would like to see more of, is making them more of a massive multiplayer kind of experience, which is way that Marvel Heroes was, where you're playing with everybody online in the same world. So you can run around a zone and you've got like 10 total strangers in there, and they're going around doing their thing and you're doing your thing. You can get together and there's raids and stuff like that. And I'd like to see more of that kind of like multiplayer, big environment kind of interaction with it, you know, making it feel like a real place where people are running around and working together, cooperating and having fun, killing things together.
For sure.
I agree.
I'd love to see, like, with the latest and greatest tech, like what they can do with like a random dungeon generation, like in this day and age. That'd be such an interesting thing interesting lane to go down.
Absolutely.
But while we're on the subject of you know, tech and programming, I'm also a programmer, and one of the things I'm generally curious about, because it's something I've always struggled with, dealing with bureaucracy as a programmer. I know you've been a programmer, you've been CEO, you've been absolutely everything you possibly be in a company. So how A, do you deal with that, and maybe B, do you have any kind of stories about that?
Yeah, I have lots of stories. You know, bureaucracy in a company is just that's just the way life is.
Sure.
The bigger a company gets, the more there is. You know, it's hard to believe. I mean, I'm in a company where I'm doing everything by myself, right, and I still argue with myself. So I don't know my own politics with myself, I guess. But I think that you know, bureaucracy, it depends. It feels like there's got to be a balance, especially in an industry where you're doing something creative. I feel like everybody feels and should deserve the opportunity to be heard and be able to be creative on a project. And so a lot of times I think that bureaucracy feels this way when we aren't getting our way, or we have to like fight for something that we want or whatever. And I think that just comes with bigger and bigger companies. And so you go into a situation like, I can't even imagine what it's like at Blizzard right now. Mm-hmm. Blizzard is a world famous, probably the most famous developer in the world. And as a programmer or a game maker in the video game industry, what would be one of your ultimate dreams was to be, can I make my own dream game at Blizzard? Right? That would be the ultimate.
Sure.
Blizzard backed my dream game kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And so as a game designer, a newbie starting out, you want to make your career. So you're going to fight for your ideas to prove that you have it, that you can be the best, that you are, going to be a legendary game designer and all of these kind of things. And so every single day you are fighting to further your career with everybody else that's doing the same thing. And so, when the company is that big and that powerful, it's going to be nothing but bureaucracy. And so it's amazing to me that they get almost anything done. I think that eventually you have to have that strong leadership and say, if we're going to do it my way, we're going to do it my way. But then you get into a situation where like new people come in, they're like, oh yeah, you haven't even been here for 2 years. We're not even going to listen to you.
Sure, yeah.
So, you know, there's got to be a balance. You have to throw people a bone. You have to be a good manager. And you have to allow people to grow in their career and grow as a person and feel like they're contributing, or they lose morale and they just don't want to participate. And then the game doesn't turn out as well and all of these kind of things. So as a creative director and as a manager, it's really important to kind of pay attention to that. And, but also know when you're spending all day in meetings arguing about something that, you know, that you've already made a decision on, that they, you know, right. we're moving on from that or whatever, you know, so you can't, you have to kind of manage it. You have to, sometimes you have to let the people make all these choices, but sometimes you have to, you know, cut it off.
Right. Do you have any like little tidbits to share on that? Like, have you?
Sure. I mean, I got a million lessons or whatever, but there are situations sometimes when people will, you know, I think that some of the best ideas come when you're open to listening. And so I think that as a manager, it really helps to listen and ask the opinions of everybody that you're working with, and take them into consideration. You don't always have to agree with them, and you aren't always going to, but it is important to do that. And I can think of a million examples where I've had to do things where we had, for instance, we were talking about different ideas. What are we going to do about how are we going to notify somebody that they have a quest available? You know, and this was when we were designing Diablo 1. We went around and like Eric and I were working on different ideas, and we couldn't think of the way that we could get the artists had their own ideas and things like that. And we kind of walked around, and eventually I ended up talking to one of the producers at, we had really only one producer who was, Matt Householder, who did a lot of, not only was mainly HR stuff, a lot of the hiring and whatnot, but also did production, was the producer for Hellfire and for the PlayStation version of Diablo and things like that. So he did kind of outside production stuff as well as, and helped manage like art house things and stuff like that if we ever use those kind of services. And as well as did a bunch of the hiring and whatnot. And so he said, well, why don't you just put an exclamation point above their head? And, you know, and so that, and that's where it was born, you know? And so the, you know, I was like, wow, that's a great idea. And
every game ever,
it's important as a manager to know when to ask and also be open and listen to everybody, because great ideas can come from anywhere.
Yeah, that's good.
That's cool. The origin of the exclamation point.
Yeah, that's crazy, because you just like, you take it for granted now. Like, what's the origin story? There it is.
And that got copied in so many games.
Like literally every game.
Every game. Yeah.
So on the same kind of subject, you know, when Blizzard comes out and makes a decision, like they came out with that video before BlizzCon that's like, you know, the forges here at Blizzard are burning hot. What do you, can you shed some light on to like how many layers that has to really go through to even like make it to the public eye? Like how much bureaucratic kind
Honestly,
of BS?
I just don't know. I don't know what it's like anymore. Like, I mean, it's been 15 years since I worked there, right? So I don't know what it's like. I can kind of imagine, but I'm sure that there were a lot of fingers in that pie before, you know, that first you got to have the group that's making it and coming up with it. And, you know, then you got to have the team that's, hey, these are our goals. This is what we want to do. This is, you know, how we're going to market Blizzard and things like that. You got whole teams of people just working on those kind of things all the time. So, you know, Blizzard has a big PR department and a big cinematics group and a big video group. And so they are constantly working on things to promote the company and make it, you know, make it exciting and appealing to the audience. So, you know, I think that for sure there are a lot of people involved in those kind of decisions before all that work gets done. Right. I think that's with anything, though. It's not just those kind of like videos, but it's going to be anything else, right? You know, the amount of scrutiny and the amount of feedback they're going to get on, let's say, Diablo 4 announcement or something like that is going to be way more than it has ever been, especially in light of Diablo Immortal.
Right.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
We kind of already
we're
touched on it a little bit. But so I was actually the guy at BlizzCon that kind of caused the boo, if you will. Were you surprised that they got booed at their own event, or?
Yeah, I was. But people have a right to voice their opinion. So,
Sure.
I don't think that it's really bad that people were upset or whatever. I think that there are lines that you shouldn't cross, like death threats and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Ridiculous. But it's okay to be upset and disappointed and have a negative reaction. I think that's everybody's entitled to that. So, was I surprised? Yes. Do I think it's wrong? No, not necessarily. I think that, people have the right to feel however they want. And there were a lot of disappointed fans.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I kind of wanted to play. So there's this clip of you back in 2012.
Okay.
And I played this kind of for my stream and for the podcast right after BlizzCon. And it's so eerie to hear it. And I'll just play it out and you can kind of react to your own words, I guess.
All right.
On one hand, I'm sad that that people haven't enjoyed Diablo because it is a love and passion and stuff like that. And it's obvious that people still have a giant love and passion for this, and they're speaking about it because they have such love for it, and that makes me feel great. I'm sad because people are outraged, and some of the decisions they made aren't decisions that I would make, and so there have been some changes in philosophy, and that hasn't gone over very well.
And I played that for people, and people were like, "Was that after BlizzCon?" I'm like, "No, that's after Diablo 3."
Yeah, that was after Diablo 3. That was when I was promoting. I was in Germany promoting Marvel Heroes, actually, and it was kind of at the end of a long day. And then I have my Hulk shirt on. You can see that. It was kind of a what do I think of Diablo 3 kind of question. So yeah, it's I think that it's still true today, is true anytime. People make a big difference when you're making a product. Having different people make a product, it's going to be different than the people that made it originally, right? And that's just the way things are, and it happens all the time in the industry. You see it time and time again.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Speaking of Marvel, I'm gonna derail slightly from all the Diablo talk. You're a huge Marvel fan?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Big, huge Marvel fan. That's why
you like the
one of
new
my
Marvel universe?
Make a Marvel game. So that's making Marvel Heroes was a pure dream of mine. Just because I love the Marvel license so much.
Yep, I agree. Favorite Marvel movie? Or we can even take it a step further. Favorite Marvel character? Who's your
It's close. I would say Thor Ragnarok's probably my current favorite Marvel movie, and Hulk is my favorite character. Nice. Awesome. But followed closely by Rocket Raccoon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like those. And then we have also had talks like you said you're a huge mobile game player, and you play Star Wars
Galaxy
Heroes.
Heroes.
Star Wars Galaxy Heroes. So you're also a big Star Wars universe fan as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, huge Star Wars fan. In fact, Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, traditionally is we binge watch all the Star Wars movies. sit on the couch and watch Star Wars all day. So
that's so awesome.
But yeah, I've seen every episodes 4, 5, and 6 well over 150 times each. So
what about 1, 2, and 3? You didn't.
Damn.
I have all.
Didn't want to watch 1, 2, and 3 150 times.
What's that?
You didn't want to watch 1, 2, and 3 150 times?
No, not at all. I'm a Star Wars fan, but I don't really remember those movies very well.
Oh, I had to get that chat.
I think the Clone Wars TV show was good.
Yeah, I've heard good things about
Rebels has been pretty good. I I'm looking forward to the new show that they're coming out with on the Disney Channel. So anyway, we'll see. I love Star Wars, and maybe someday I'll make a Star Wars game. That'd be fun.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
On the subject of stars, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about Starblow?
Sure. I mean, not really.
Sure.
Not much to tell, but but it was basically it was the concept that we were working on when we left Blizzard North, which was Diablo in space, basically. And obviously it hasn't gone anywhere. But it was random planets that you would visit. And you had a ship that you could modify and upgrade and take it from planet to planet. And then the planet was infested with, you go into dungeons and areas and stuff like that. So it's a little bit like Diablo 2, but imagine you go to different planets and then you have like a base or a spaceship that you take with you to these and upgrade that as well. So that was kind of the basic concept behind it. But it never saw the light of day, and we didn't work on it for too long. It was only, it was probably only about a year in development or something like that. Maybe not even that long.
So was that just going to be
really cool, actually.
ARPG, or was that going to be kind of in the Diablo universe?
No, it was not in the Diablo universe. It had its own universe. But we just called it, just like, they had Warcraft and then they had StarCraft. We had Diablo and Starblow. And it was just a nickname. We didn't have a name for it yet. But you can gather what it would be like just from that kind of simple description.
Sure.
But yeah, it was ARPG.
So another kind of fun question. You mentioned that Diablo 1's ending was kind of the cinematic team's doing.
Yeah.
Did you have like an original image in your own head, in your own mind's eye, of what you thought how Diablo should have ended?
Yeah, and I thought that we had talked about it, so I was kind of surprised when I saw that. And I didn't like it at first. I was like, "Oh my god!" I was really kind of upset about it and stuff. But then after a little while, it started to grow on me, and now in hindsight, it was the right call. It was, I thought it turned out that it was good. It was, I think that it's kind of a classic ending at this point. So I think that they made the right decision, even though I wasn't in favor of it at first, and it was not what we had talked about. So I was quite surprised when I first saw it. And plus, we was like everything was kind of coming in hot, right? We're finishing finishing the game. My wife was pregnant with our child, 9 months pregnant. At the time, it was like we were trying to make it for Christmas, and we were crunching through the Thanksgiving holidays and in December and all the way through. And we took a day off for Christmas and then came back the next day and then and worked and then finished the game and had it on store shelves on December 31st. And then my kid was born a couple days later. So that was it was a really crazy time. So when this cinematic came and it wasn't what I expected, I just almost didn't have the energy to do it. And it was like, we're out of time. I just can't even deal with this or whatever. But after thinking about it and kind of soaking it in for a little while, I realized that it was cool.
Could you shed any details or any light, or do you even remember what you kind of had expected it to end like?
No, I don't remember. No,
right on.
That's funny.
Go ahead.
The second Diablo expansion you had planned, Diablo 2 expansion you had planned. You had mentioned that you had a cleric as an AoE healer. What other skill sets did you envision that cleric having?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had really unusual healing mechanics for an ARPG. Someday maybe I'll use it, but that was one of the classes. It was kind of based on this kind of dark and light kind of cleric concept, anyway, there was another class too. I can't remember what it is right now, but there were two classes that we had kind of designed for it, and as well as other things. Somewhere I still have the write up, but obviously I can't share it or anything like that. I'm sure that Blizzard would be upset. But yeah, there was a second expansion that we kind of that I designed a lot of, but we never really went far on it.
Damn, that would have been great.
Let's spend a little time talking about your game you're working on now.
Oh, yeah.
You have a game. It lurks
Okay.
below. So tell us about it. You know, some of our audience may not know that you're making this. So give us your pitch. I want to hear about it.
Okay. Well, in a nutshell, the game is Diablo meets, Terraria or Starbound, whatever. So it's one of the things is I really love the game Starbound, and I love Minecraft and like these kind of digging, crafting games or whatever, but they've always lacked the kind of depth that I've wanted in a real RPG. So the idea was, hey, I'm gonna make a game. I had left Gazillion, where I was doing Marvel Heroes, and I quit the company and said, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to make games. And I wanted to make a small team, and we were going to work on a kind of an indie project or whatever. And then as I got going, I realized that I think that I could do this entire thing myself. So for some crazy reason, I've gone from being CEO of a company where I could barely work on games and spend all my time with investors to doing all of the work. So I've done everything in this project. I've done all the art, all the programming, all the sound, the music, design, et cetera, et cetera. I've gotten lots and lots of design feedback from the community, but it's kind of a 2D, 3D hybrid. The world is made up of 3D blocks, and then you have sprites, hand-drawn sprites on top of that, which are just textured polygons facing the camera, and so it's basically a little bit like, it's a lot like Diablo. There's a lot of action to it. There are different character classes. You can play as Necromancer, Warrior, Paladin, Rogue, Cleric, Wizard, Enchanter, Bard. And those are, I think, the 8 character classes in the game right now. And they all play very differently. They all have different skills that they get. And the game is a little bit about survival. And you can go and you have to do some farming and chopping down trees and crafting stuff, and you dig down into the ground and you find ore and you make new items, and then you kill monsters. The game's got tons and tons of monsters that are below the surface, and there's a dungeon down there. It's got bosses, and they drop all sorts of randomized loot. So they'll drop randomized weapons, they'll drop randomized crystals, which you put into your crafted armor, which have lots of random stats and stuff. And there are a lot of stats in the game. Critical hits and hit points and armor class and resistances and all sorts of stuff, magic find, and all of the kind of game depth that you would get from kind of a Diablo game. So it looks a little bit like a Terraria Starbound style game, but it plays a lot like Diablo. It's a high action game. It can get crazy. The action gets super crazy, and it has a lot of depth in a survival aspect as well as a kind of action RPG.
Sounds really awesome.
And it's on Steam right now in early access. I update the game very regularly. I believe that it came out in early access in April, and I think I've had 115 up patches or something like that to date. I patch often. Sometimes I'll even patch a couple times in a day, and then I have a lot of feedback. I play the game on Twitch. I watch other people play the game on Twitch. I answer questions. We got a Discord that I'm always in, talking to the people, getting suggestions and feedback, and finding bugs and et cetera, et cetera. I'm very active on the Steam forum. So even though it's early access, it is, I'm doing a lot of open communication about the project and what to expect and where it's going and things like that. So
yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
I've definitely
really
seen
cool.
some.
I really like the fact that you hop in other streams,
that's awesome.
And people are streaming your game and you'll hop in and talk with them. That's really cool. I think as for the community, it's like, oh, the guy cares about the game. He's here getting our feedback and our opinions. That's really cool.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me too. It's not only is it great because I'm getting good feedback, and my job is to make the best possible game that I can make. And so the more feedback I get from the community about what they like and don't like, and I can fix the parts that they don't like, that's really helpful to me. So I think it not only just makes a better game, but it makes a great community interaction and a close community that makes people personally invested in the product, because they're giving suggestions that they actually see in the game. Like they'll say, "Oh, could you do this?" And the next day it's in the game, and they're like, "Wow, that's amazing. That's really fun." Yeah. So that's been a lot of what the interactions and kind of experience has been like, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. This is something that I kind of started with Marvel Heroes. The launch of Marvel Heroes was very poor, and the game was not that great. And so one of the things that we ended up doing is I said, everybody in the company can chat with the people on the forums. No matter what your job is, there isn't going to be a PR department or anything like that. Be open and honest and direct with everybody. Don't be insulting.
That's awesome.
There are privileges, but this is get in there and communicate with everybody and be straightforward. And we just said, okay, we're going to do this, and then it would show up in a couple weeks, and people see this kind of going over and over again, and we ended up changing our Metacritic score from 56 Metacritic to an 82 or something like that in 1 year, because of all of our interaction and working. And that kind of experience where we were working with the audience and interacting with the audience, and I was on Twitch playing the game all the time and things like that, really got me into that. And I don't think I'll ever make games the same way because of that. I just enjoyed that process so much.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the process of the future, which, I would say Blizzard as a whole, their Metacritic score is on the low end right now. So I feel like they could definitely benefit from that kind of business model. But do you think, like, being as involved as you are with, Or Lurks Below, do you think that could work on a big scale at all?
I think it's harder.
Yeah.
I mean, the bigger your audience. I mean, I'm kind of blessed in some ways that the audience isn't like millions and millions of people right now, because I don't think that I could deal with it, right? So it's great that I'm able to work with the community being the size it is, where you have a couple thousand people. If you're going to have millions of people, you'll get too many suggestions and things like that. So there's got to be a little bit of a fine line. That's why you end up in a situation where Blizzard does a lot of closed beta stuff or whatever, because they can get plenty of feedback without being overwhelmed and having fights all the time on the on the forums about what's right and what's wrong and things like that. So.
Right.
So one question I have: tell me about the end game a little bit. On
the Lurks Below.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like Diablo. There's a dungeon below below the surface. As you dig down, go further and further towards the hell, and there's end boss, etc. What is it? It's below. So you got to figure out what it is. The story isn't in the game yet, but there is a story, and that's coming soon. And not all the bosses are in, but there are different difficulties. You can do normal difficulty or nightmare difficulty, and there's going to be a hell difficulty. Nice. And the way that it works is, as you're playing the game here, you can you kind of build your town. So there's different buildings that you can build. So you go and you mine up the supplies and collect the stuff or whatever, and you build a general store, and you build a bank, and there's a pet shop and like all sorts of things. And one of them is this wizard tower where you can buy a book, and it resets the world everywhere above. The world is broken up into these kind of zones, and the dirt looks different in each one of the zones. And so the top zone stays the same, but everything else gets re-randomized below. So different monsters, different layouts, et cetera, et cetera. All the bosses get respawned. So you can play it over and over in normal difficulty or nightmare difficulty. And soon,
is there a death penalty if you die? Is it one life, or is it?
There are several different modes in the game. You can play in survival mode, which has hunger and stamina and some stuff like that, making it a more difficult game. And then you have descent mode, which gets rid of the hunger and stuff, and you can just go kill monsters. And then you can play either survival hardcore or descent hardcore.
Oh man,
which is one life. And then I also have a creative mode where it like basically gives you free supplies to make all of the crafting stuff, and you can just build blocks and things like that if you want.
That sounds really awesome. So,
are you still shooting for Q1 next year?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. But that seems like that keeps slipping.
Right.
It was only going to be 3 to 6 months at the beginning, and now it's been in early access for about 9 months now or 8 months now. So, but the game's gotten much bigger, and I've made a lot of decisions that have improved the game. So it's been worth it.
Is there kind of like a post-release content plan?
Yeah, I would like to make it, if it's successful enough, I want to make it multiplayer, and so that's what I'm hoping will be the case. Even if that doesn't happen, if it isn't successful enough to do multiplayer, I for sure will be adding new classes. I've got like different maps and stuff that I'm going to generate, so you can randomly generated maps and stuff that have affixes and all sorts of things. So the end game content, I'll put in new bosses. I've got seasonal events that are already in the game. In fact, there's a seasonal event going on right now in the kind of a winter event. So you can collect these snowflakes and buy some special pets and hats and things like that you can only get right now. So cool. Some fun stuff to do. So it'll still have things like that, and I will be supporting it for a long time.
Right on.
Awesome. Well,
go ahead.
Do you want to go into some Twitter questions, guys?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. If you guys aren't familiar with this section, every week we asked you, the audience, to submit some questions on Twitter or Discord. So the first question comes from Brian, and he says, "How likely is co-op and It Lurks Below?" You just answered that. So
yeah, I hope it's very likely. That would mean that the game's a success, right? So
yeah. So it's very likely, Brian. It's going to be a success. So there you go.
The feedback's been great and very positive on the game. So I have reasonable expectations that it'll generate enough revenue to, make it so that I don't have to go get another job and be able to work for a couple of years.
Yeah. Wiz and War says, please ask David about tuning difficulty in regards to first impressions on the player.
That's a tough question. I think that in general, I am a person that believes in making everything super easy at the beginning and kind of ramping up pretty sharply from there, and making it so that you feel like you can achieve something right at the very beginning, and then advance yourself. You run into a wall where you fail, and then you have to do something to succeed. So one of the things that I've got a little bit of a test here at It Lurks Below at the beginning, where you have to defeat a boss really before I kind of send you down beneath the ground and let you go face the first boss. I've got a little mini boss as a little test, and it makes you go out there and I say, build a better weapon and build some armor. And if you build some of the armor, there's a good chance that you're going to get killed by the boss. But if you build all the armor, then you can notice a difference. And so I think that it's important to notice a difference in your progression. It's like, oh, I had trouble with this, but I can overcome it if I, build the armor. So doing things like that, I think, is important, where people feel like they can progress. And you have to kind of keep that up the whole game, where you get a little bit of a carrot where it's this seems like it's really easy, and then surprise, something happens, you change the rules, something unexpected happens, and now they have a new challenge to deal with, and so that constant sense of a little bit of challenge and a little bit of payoff for getting over that hump, and then kind of going back and forth through that. So I always try and design something to kind of mix and match that feeling.
Very cool.
Awesome. Raikukan LOL says, do you think it's better to have a game that gets lots of additional content over time funded by monetization options through its life cycle, or would it be better to have a one-time cost sequels, huge expansions? So I think he's asking microtransaction.
Yeah, I think that in general, I lean towards single purchases. I think as an industry, we've gotten ourselves into a bit of trouble. Everybody's trying to make games as a service right now. And a lot of times when those games as a service games exist, unfortunately, they have to make them super grindy, right? And the experience of being able to play through something and being done with it and moving on with your life, I think is important. And so, you know, I like the box product stuff. That doesn't mean there isn't room for these kind of games as a service games, but they're just kind of a different style of gaming. So if you're going to do that, realize that, like World of Warcraft, like you can get involved in that game and play it for 4 years and never play another game, right? And that happened to a lot of people. Like me, I didn't touch another game for 4 years. I only played World of Warcraft every day, you know, and that's not really. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I enjoyed my time there, but I'm glad that I also really enjoy kind of single off experiences. Now, every game, like where you buy a box and they've got all these kind of minor content things, as I understand as a gamer, it would be frustrating to have to buy all these add-ons to feel like you're getting the whole game. The problem is that the cost of games. The cost of manufacturing games has gone up so much in the last 10 years even, but even before that, compared to what it used to be. And so profitability has gone down simply because it costs so much more as a profit, as a percentage basis. Like it used to be, you could make a game with a team of 10 people or 15 people, let's say 20 people on the outside, and do it in 2 years and have a hit that generates multiple revenue, you know, a multiplier of like 4 or 5 on your cost. But that isn't the case anymore. When games cost, they have 300 plus people and they cost, you know, several $100 million to make. You better hope that you hit on that, and you're going to spend a couple $100 million on marketing and all of this kind of stuff. And now you've spent $400 million on making this game or more. And you better hope that it is a big hit. And if you don't have a big hit, that's a big loss. And so one of the things that they're doing is that they've got to find different ways to kind of recover their costs. And they tried raising game prices. Game prices have been the same for a very long time, and it costs much more to make them now. And so, you know, where's the money going to come from? Because there are lots of game companies that go out of business because they don't make enough money. So I don't see it changing. I think that DLC or this kind of like loot boxes or whatever are not going away, that they are working. And the reason they're not going away is because they're working. And so you got to kind of, the only way that you're going to, if you don't like them, don't buy them. But the thing is that they've got to come up with other ways to generate revenue because it's just such a risky business at this point.
Right.
Yep. I agree with that. iFlew asks, he says, I feel the pace of Diablo games is hurting the lore of the game. What can be done to make it more engaging / persistent? I think he means the pace of the releases of the games is what I take that as. But
the pace of release of Diablos once every 11 years? Or I'm not really sure what we're talking about here, but the pace and the lore. I mean, are they saying that people just like rush through the game and they don't pay attention to the story?
Yeah, I would say that's what like, so like, you know, speed farming, like it's like crazy fast. Does that ruin immersion? I guess maybe is that what he's saying?
Could be.
Oh, absolutely it does. But, you know, I think that people have been trained. It's so weird. It's so weird to me the way that gaming is right now that everybody, for example, I can't even imagine being on the World of Warcraft expansion team. You just spent 2 years of your life making all this content, and everybody doesn't want to play any of it. They don't. They just want to rush right through the content and get to the end so that they can be at the end game. Right. So people don't want to make content. They don't want the content. They want the end game content. Like that's everything. And so it's kind of strange to me that people like say, oh, you know, that they don't enjoy the content. They don't enjoy what they've made. They just got to rush right through it to get to what they perceive as the real content of the game. Right. So it's, you know, I think that is true. It has nothing to do with the pace. It has everything to do with the pace that people consume media. And they go through, you can slow the game down, but then you're just going to make the audience angry. Like
Sure.
the World of Warcraft team was like, oh, it took a long time to go. It took 3 weeks to get through the expansion content, and I'm really upset because it took me 3 weeks to get to the end game, right? You know, and so like they don't want that. People don't want it, and so I think that's kind of a strange situation we're in right now, where the whole game is the actual content that you're playing, but nobody really wants to experience it. Instead, they just want to rush through it. It's very strange. I don't know how to explain it, or what the solution is.
Right. Yeah. That's funny.
Superman 8919 says, what do you think about an MMO Diablo? And I know we kind of talked about this too.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I think it depends. What people means mostly by MMO Diablo is that they mean, do they mean World of Warcraft style, EverQuest World of Warcraft style, or do they mean like Marvel Heroes, where you've got, it's an action RPG, but you've got lots and lots of people in the same world. And I think that I would lean towards that kind of play of keeping it like Diablo and not like making it like World of Warcraft. I mean, World of Warcraft's been done. That game's been played, and that game's been played a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many people that have tried to imitate it and haven't been very successful. So, and I think that the idea of an MMO that's kind of grindy like that and has a long amount of content and whatever isn't as appealing to somebody as it maybe once was, because a lot of people have done that and they're like, I'm not really willing to sacrifice the next 5 years of my life to this game. And so I think that making kind of a hybrid experience where you have a lot more community, you have a lot of people that you can play with and friends, and you get together and be online and kind of experience the world together or beat bosses together. I mean, that's really what kind of multiplayer that I would like to see. And making that so you can do it with 10 or 20 or 50 people would be really fun.
Do you find it weird that, so like World of Warcraft obviously was this huge phenomenon, and we saw MMOs coming out like almost every month for a while, and now it's battle royales, and we're seeing battle royales come out left and right. Do you think it's weird that Diablo never really had that, like, we didn't see Diablo clones like left and right?
No. Yeah, I'm not really sure why, but that is true. Like, I mean, there are some Diablo clones, but it's not like again, it's not like a battle royale game or like a MOBA or something like that, where it's like everybody and their mom was making them. There were 27 versions of it, and I'm not really sure why that is the case, but that has always been true. And I think part of it maybe is because, especially in a situation with a battle royale, is that it's a pretty easy game to make. In terms of getting the balance right and stuff like that is very difficult. So I don't want to belittle them, but in terms of actual content, there isn't, you're shooting some people on an island, it's not really like there's, we've got to have like 8,000, different swords and bosses and like all these kind of like, making an RPG is really, really difficult. There's just tons of items and content and stuff that you need to make, story and bosses and monsters and like all this stuff that makes it kind of a more difficult thing to make. That doesn't really explain the phenomenon of all of the MMOs that came out, because those are very difficult to make too, but it does explain why the content was pretty thin on a lot of them.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
That's fascinating.
I'm going to jump down a question because it's almost the same thing. Onion asked, should Diablo 4 be an MMO?
Again, I think that as an ARPG MMO, yes. I do. I think that would be awesome.
Have you seen any of the Lost Ark?
I have seen a little bit of the Lost Ark footage that people have been pretty excited about it. It'd be nice to have it here.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. Tiny Pluto says, how happy are you from the development of Diablo 1 to Diablo 3? Like the cycle. I think he's meaning the direction it's gone.
Well, I think that overall, I think that the progress is good now. I think that Diablo 2 wasn't super well received when it first came out either. And after the expansion, it got much better. And then after the 110 patch, it got even better. So I think that there were some things that it took a little while for Diablo 2 to really kind of find its feet. Diablo 1, there's a lot of people that say still are big Diablo 1 fans and feel like that one's the best because that one's the creepiest, the darkest, the scariest, etc. And that kind of feeling of the butcher, the first time you open that door and the butcher came out, like that feeling is almost impossible to capture. And there's almost no games ever that have kind of been able to kind of, where you experience that same kind of vibe or whatever. So Diablo 2 was much more lighthearted than Diablo 1 in terms of, the gore and etc. But I think that that overall I'm pleased with the Diablo franchise. I think that it's in a good spot, and it's still super popular, and people really enjoy the game. And it's pretty amazing to me that game has lasted as long as it has when it's only had a few versions of it.
Yeah. And I think, I heard you talk about it before, how the Blizzard South was a little bit, their style was a little less dark and cringy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's kind of, I think as Diablo's progressed from 1, 2, and 3, it's gotten, a little bit less for every iteration. I personally would like to see it go a little darker. Do you like the direction it's going, or you think it's okay?
I think there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way, that they would love to see a darker Diablo sometime. That they would love to get back to the really dark and scary. And I think that's a theme I hear often.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Red Pool Dead says, if you could give any advice to current staff of the Diablo team, what would it be? That's such an open question.
Good luck.
Good luck.
The expectations are only sky high, so they, I think that they've got a very difficult job, and I wish them well, and I hope that they do something that they're happy with.
Awesome.
So, one quick question. So, there's been obviously a ton of rumors about Diablo 2 remastered being a thing eventually.
Right.
Is there anything this time around that you'd like to see maybe omitted from the game? If they were not to just be a copy paste.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I've talked about this a bunch, but I think that in general, it's impossible to actually do a true remaster of Diablo 2. Right. Not only does it not make sense, but I think that it's just technically impossible. Part of the reason is because the screen shape was 4:3, and now so many screens are 16:9 or 16:10. And because of that, there's a lot of extra room on the sides of the screen. And so for a real remaster, you would have to have the same aspect ratio, and that doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And that's because literally the monsters, when there is a little AoE awareness radius around you, and when it was slightly bigger than the screen, so like skills went slightly off the edge of the screens, the awareness radius was slightly off the screen. So if you've got this extra area on both sides, you're going to see monsters sitting out there looking really dumb. They're not going to be moving. Just be sitting there and idle, Right. So, and if you wanted the true remaster, that would be the only way you could do it. So then it begs the question, well, what do you change and what do you don't change? And how much of a remaster really is it? Is it really the same game? And like all of these kind of things. And then are you just making kind of a weird Diablo 2.5, or, whatever version you want to call it, 2B. And so, it's hard to tell if that is, what to change and et cetera, et cetera. I think that in general, if I had to change things, one of the things that I would change the most would be instance looting, which really didn't exist when we made it. I get rid of the stamina bar. And there are, a few other things like that I think would be good quality of life kind of changes. But then is it really the same game? People would be really upset with the fact that it's instant loot because they like the game of stealing all the crap from their friends while they and so, you're not going to please everybody with a remaster. And I think that it's going to be difficult to capture the same spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you like to see the body part crafting, come back that you guys had originally in Diablo 2?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would love that, but it got squashed for a reason. I mean, it was really gruesome. I mean, your inventory was full of eyeballs and livers. It was a bad scene in there.
For sure.
Oh man. That was the question we had. Coda was going to ask what quality of life changes we have. So there's your answer, Coda. And then this next question is actually from me. And it is the age-old question on this podcast: sausage or bacon?
Oh man, that's tough. Are you talking about for breakfast or just in general?
You just have to pick one, like sausage or bacon. It's just an open question, man. Sausage or bacon?
I gotta go.
There's a right answer.
I gotta go bacon.
Damn.
But I love both. I mean, I really love both. So that's a really tough choice.
Yeah. His man's got taste. That's what can I say. So, I always pick bacon and fluff the sausage, guys. So
bacon's great, but you can do so much more with sausage.
That's really all the questions we had. I mean, there were a couple extras, but if I didn't get your question, I'm sorry, guys. We had so many questions this week, and I can't keep David here all night as much as I'd like to.
Right.
So, Graybeard Games. What's the future of Graybeard Games? Are you going to continue with It Lurks Below? Are you going to?
I mean, It Lurks Below is what's currently on, the foreseeable horizon, which is great with me. I mean, it's a dream game for me. I'm having a ton of fun making it. It's funny. I can barely even sleep. I can't wait to get up and work on it. It's awesome. Just like, I just really enjoy the entire process. So, it's been such a pleasure to be able to do that. And so I would love to continue to work on it and improve it and put in multiplayer and do some stuff like that to make it bigger and better. And my art's getting better, so it's my skills are slowly improving. So maybe someday
it's impressive, man, to do all that by yourself. The sound is the most interesting thing to me, because as I work in IT, I'm a computer geek as well. So I get the coding and I can see the relations to all the art design and stuff, but the sound to me is like you have a whole sound studio set up there, or how are you capturing all these things?
I play a lot of instruments, and I've been into music since I was a little kid.
That's so
played
awesome.
the piano since I was 6, and I was in marching band even through college, and I'm a big time band geek and have been for a long time. So and I still play instruments, and I taught myself to play ukulele a few years ago. I've been really into that for the last 5 years or so. Anyway, so there's a lot of, I understand a lot about music. It was probably my second biggest passion. And so that it's been a joy to be able to work on sound and music in general. I enjoy that entire process.
That's super awesome. I actually am going to be streaming your game as soon as the podcast is over. So if you guys want to check it out, it lurks below. I'll be streaming that. And where can everybody find you at? Promote yourself, your game, your Discord, anything you want to throw out.
We've got It Lurks Below is on Steam. It's on sale right now in the winter sale, and it's in early access. I expect it to be done with early access in the next 3 months or so, and you can find me on Twitter at David Brevik, and you can email me at contact@Graybeard Games. Their Graybeard Games website has the original Diablo 2 design document, or Diablo 1 design document up there. Awesome. As well as a link to a game jam game I made called the Nonomancer. If anybody knows what a nonogram is, it's a Picross game. I made a little game jam game, so you can play that. It's a free download. And then it's got a link to It Lurks Below and all the information there. And then I have a Discord, It Lurks Below, and I'll send out a link to that too later.
Awesome. Very cool. My name is ThaPChild. You can catch me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, everywhere at ThaPChild.
Yeah. I'm Lord_Fluffy. Double those underscores on the Twitters. Thanks so much, David, for coming on and doing this. It's been
my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me
to talk to you.
So awesome. So thank you again very much.
Appreciate it. It was
fun. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.